Did you know you can buy a business and pay the seller months or even years after you take over? The tricky part is getting them to agree. But after structuring my own 1.6 million acquisition as a chartered accountant, I realised there's a simple, repeatable way to get these deals agreed. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to buy your first business with seller finance and pay them after taking over, by showing a fellow business buyer step by step how I agreed £260,000 of seller financing to buy a £1 million civil engineering business. And here's that conversation with another first-time business buyer.
If a person was trying to get an acquisition on a not on a no money down, but on a staged basis,
Yeah.
is it best to try and take the deal completely on seller finance, or try to get a combination of invoice financing and asset financing if they're available, use that as a lump sum, and then do the seller financing every 90 days or every 180 days?
I think, to answer your question with a very annoying answer, it really does depend. Okay. With financing of a deal, no one size fits all. And really and truly, what you need to do is to become quite creative. In fact, it's part of a deal that I love. I love being creative. So the best approach would be is that you've got to build the rapport with the owner, that they trust you, because they're effectively lending you the money. And I always say that you wouldn't ask someone to marry you on day one because they don't know, like, and trust you. And it's similar. You're getting to bed with the owner. They're lending you, potentially a lot of money, and they've got to trust that you're going to pay that back. So, and I think that's wrapped up in a couple of things. One, that are you a upstanding, respectable person that I can trust you as a person? But equally, do I think this person can run my business and keep it being a success as it was, because it's the business that's going to be paying back that financing. So aside from seller financing, because that's paid out of cash flows, to use your hybrid part of the question, is really when you're looking at a business in the first instance, you want to be looking at the balance sheet to see what's on the balance sheet. A, whether you've got assets, whether you've got equipment, you've got debtors, you've got stock, etc., etc. And then B, whether it's unencumbered or has it got finance on it. So what I'll do is I'll give you an example of a business deal that fell through. And this is and this is why, every deal is different. This was an amazing deal. It was a civil engineering business. And that deal did include seller financing, but that was the balance. It included invoice financing. It included asset financing, because if you can imagine, a civil engineering business has got diggers and all these bigger pieces of equipment that dig up the tarmac, lay the tarmac, hundreds of thousands of pounds, but it was all unencumbered. There was no debt. So it was like, when I looked at it, I thought, right, okay, asset finance. And asset finance on the face is relatively straightforward, because it's not like going to a bank and saying, right, I want to borrow money to buy this business. And they've got to do all their due diligence. Has it got the interest cover? All of those problems, and doing the credit checks on the business, you, and all that sort of thing. All they say is, right, this asset is £100,000. Do I think I can get £100,000 for it? Yes. I will lend you 60% of that, 70% of that. So they know the asset, they will lend against that asset. And it's relatively straightforward. So on the balance sheet, it had all these assets, but then also it had debtors. So I arranged invoice financing as well in this particular case. And I didn't even own this business at this point in time. I'd arranged asset finance, I'd arranged invoice finance with the blessing of the seller. But I didn't know anything about civil engineering. And I found a guy who, in fact, it was through diving. I'm a scuba diver, and it was a dive club. And he used to work for one of the big companies, and I'm trying to remember which one it was now. It's one of the companies you would see at the side of, when you're going down a motorway, whether it was a Langs or one of these big civil engineering businesses. And he wanted out. I'd spoken to him before, and I gave him the opportunity. But all of that's irrelevant before you've arrived at an agreeable buying price. That probably makes sense. So
Yes.
you don't know what you're financing until you've agreed a price between you and the seller.
Yeah.
So what I do with any deal I look at, have you heard of my software called AquiCalc?
AquiCalc, yes.
For me, I'm an accountant. I'm a chartered accountant by background,
Yes.
and I can't look at balance sheets without using that because it just makes the whole job easier. So you put all the numbers in, ideally 3 years P&L, ideally 3 years of balance sheet. That not only gives you all the ratios and it shows you how the business has been doing, it will then help you value the business so that when you go to see the business owner, you've got an idea of what you would be paying for that business. And then depending on whether it's got a price on it, if you've gone through a broker, it will have a price on it. If you've gone direct to an owner who hasn't necessarily had a broker look at it, he may not have had a broker say, oh, I think it's worth X. But you want to get a price out of them first. And then let's say your valuation came out at, let's say 300,000 quid, just to pick a number. And the owner turns around and says, well, I think this is worth £400,000. You know, you've got a bit of negotiating to do. But if you valued it at £300,000 and he said to you, it could be he or she said to you, well, I'm looking at about £200,000, you've already saved yourself £100,000, right? So that's why it's important to get them to go first. And built into it is something called the Ackerman method. And the Ackerman method starts with your kind of guide price, and then it takes you go with 65%, 85%, and so on. So if they're really struggling to go forward because they say, well, I have got no idea, you could go forth with saying, well, a business like this would be in the range of this to this. You're not actually putting an offer on the table per se. You're just saying a business like this would be valued from this to this, and that'd be your starting point. But that would be kind of a last resort. So I've gone slightly off tangent here. I hope this is useful information for you, Garrett.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so.
Before we continue with this conversation, I'd just like to bring this back to you for a moment. If you need help with your journey to buy a business, from finding deals to valuing businesses to structuring the purchase, you can follow the link below to book your free Zoom session, just like this one. But now back to the conversation.
So now let's assume that he came in with 400 and you thought, well, actually, I don't want to pay more than 300. And however you negotiated it down, you got it down to your 300. Let's say you've agreed £300,000. So that's now when you start to look at how you can finance that deal. And whenever I was speaking to owners, and not every owner will do this, let's take the civil engineering business. I left that till the last question. I'd spent a long time with him. As part of my course, I have a 50 odd questions that you ask a business, and it goes into real detail about everything. And I think that serves, in my opinion, it serves two purposes. Number one, it gives you a lot of information about the business, quite in depth. This is even before due diligence about, is it dependent on the owner? What is the concentration of customers? And what I mean by that, do you know what I mean by concentration of customers?
Yeah. Essentially, one is the worst number in business, which is that
correct.
You only have one customer, you're in trouble. And ideally, you'd want to have hundreds of different customers so that if you lose one, it doesn't have a huge effect on you.
Absolutely. So part of the initial questions is to find out some of these key things as to whether it's actually worth buying or not. But the other aspect of this questioning is that by asking what I would call good questions, you come across as really knowing what you're talking about. Now, many people have asked me, I'm really worried about the business owner saying, well, why should I sell the business to you? What do you know about my business? What do you know about business? And I can say hand on heart, even though I'd never bought a business before when I bought my business, yes, I'd been an entrepreneur and I'd owned businesses and so on before. So I suppose I had a head start on some people, but not one asked me, have you ever owned a business like this? Have you ever operated a business like this? Or have you ever owned a business? They didn't necessarily know because I made it all about them, all about the business. I asked all the questions, and rarely did they ever ask me a question about me, which was really interesting. So I think if you take charge of the meeting by making all about them and their business, it serves those two really crucial purposes. But on top of that, if you're asking questions, who's in control of that meeting?
The person asking the questions.
But who thinks they're in control of that meeting?
Well, I would guess if you're getting them to talk and they're opening up, they would feel as though, yeah, that they're taking control.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the case. Now, on that note, Gareth, let me just show you. Have you read that book? Oh, let me get it into focus.
Oh no, I've heard of that. I've never. Yeah, it's the FBI.
Correct.
Who wrote it? He used to be an FBI negotiator.
Yeah. If
Right.
nothing else from this meeting, Gareth, get it on Kindle or paperback. I recommend paperback because mine's really dog-eared and it does look a bit dog-eared, but you can make notes. I mean, my wife it says it's sacrosanct to fold pages and make notes in a book, but it's a working copy. So, but yeah,
Okay.
I think buy that book because there's some real nuggets in there about negotiation.
Yeah, I was just thinking with you mentioned about the construction company deal that didn't go ahead. Firstly, how did you source that deal? And secondly, if it had gone ahead, now you mentioned you had a colleague who would have run the business,
Yeah.
but if you didn't have him, would you have still gone ahead with that deal anyway?
To answer the first question, that was actually through a broker.
Right. Okay.
To answer the second question, yes, I would, because it had the staff already.
Yeah.
And had I not had him, I would have further asked questions as to who the managers were and who I could either bring up into that position.
Yeah.
So that's what I would have done. And actually, I forgot to add on with when I was talking about AcquiCalc. So you'll put in the numbers, it will help you to assess the business, like a sort of a light touch due diligence, which will help you focus on due diligence further down the track. It will help you produce a valuation, but then on the back of that, which is kind of the crux of what you're talking about, it has a section on how to finance a deal. So you can
Right.
play around with it, putting in whether it's asset financing, whatever type of financing, vendor financing, lump sums, and so on, to get from your let's use this £300,000 model to say, right, okay, I'm going to get 50% vendor finance and 150 grand. So then I've got 150 grand to finance. So if I was to put in, let's say you've got the balance sheet in front of you, let's say there's a couple of hundred grand of equipment there, and you think, well, okay, let's be conservative. I get 60% of that. So, you get your 60% of the 200 grand, you put that in, you put in the period that's over, and then that will take it off the amount that you're now got left with, and it will show you the cash flow that you want to make sure that's cash flow positive with the profitability, because you've put the profit in already, and you want to make sure that the financing is fundable by the cash flow, because this is the important thing. I think you understand this, is that it's not you paying this money, it's the business funding the financing.
Yeah.
And there's no point in doing a deal unless the business can fund it.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in doing that, because A, you won't succeed, and B, the seller won't get his money, and that doesn't help anybody.
So now you know how to buy business with seller financing. Getting your first deal over the line becomes realistic, but deal structure only works if the numbers stack up in the first place. So how do you value business and avoid overpaying? Watch this video next, and I'll walk you through a simple way to value business so you never pay more than you should.